Yes.
Especially when you know that you're so close to teaching, and it's just it takes a lot of work. But
Yeah. Yes. Oh well, that should be good. So, right. So, are you the organizer, or who is the organizer of this session?
the organizer is Shreya. She just joined.
Hello.
Hi, Shreya.
Hello, Shreya.
Therefore,
At
yes,
least David's here.
I'll be starting
David-
the session shortly.
Right. Yeah. No, that's fine. Fine. We're just waiting for our other colleague, Jason, to turn up, because he's going to drive the presentation. This is the time when you get a bit nervous, isn't it?
It'll be all right.
Oh, I'm sure it will. If not, we'll have to tap dance and make it up as we go along. So
no tap dancing here, I'm afraid, Paul.
Okay.
Afternoon, everyone.
Bye.
Can you all hear me, yeah?
Hear you perfectly.
Yes.
Great.
Oh, phew. Jason, thank goodness.
Hi.
Hi. Right, so Jason's going to drive this, I think. So. God, somebody's productive.
I think we'll give it another few minutes.
Okay. But we were just speculating that people involved in the hackathons are a bit like Bake Off, where they say you have 5 minutes to go. So they're in the last hour now, are they?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Okay. I think we've all been there as to, I discover the fatal flaw in all of this.
Past year's been one big hack.
Yes. Yes.
Certainly has.
Right.
Martin, shall I start or shall I give a few more minutes?
Right.
We'll just wait another 2 minutes for everyone to join, and then we'll make a start.
Okay, thank you. Oh.
Okay, I think we'll make a start now then, if you're ready. Okay, firstly, hello everyone, my name's Shreya and I'm part of the organising team for Birmingham Open Hack. Firstly, I would like to welcome everyone to this Inspire session and thank you all for joining. Just a quick note, I am recording the session and it is being streamed on YouTube Live. So we have 3 speakers from the NHS who will talk about the changes the pandemic has led to. So we have Jason Brewster, Paul Hopkins and David Unsworth. I'll hand it over to you guys and you can introduce yourself. Thank you.
That's great. So my name is David Unsworth and I work for NHS England and NHS Improvement as a head of programmes. So my role incorporates delivering and overseeing the delivery of all of the internally facing ICT programmes that the organisation runs. Paul, do you want to just say a few words?
Yeah, I'm Paul Hopkins. I used to be the interim IT director at BCU until about a year ago. Within the NHS, I'm the interim programme director for the same programme as David, and I'm also looking to try and create one of the largest ERP implementations globally, again, as part of the NHS.
And Jason?
Hi, I'm Jason Brewster. I work at the NHS Leadership Academy, which is now part of NHS England and Improvement. I'm the advisor for distance learning. So I look after how do we do leadership development at distance. And I'm involved with the aspirant leadership development work stream and international leadership development.
Thank you. So the first thing that we wanted to cover today is what is the NHS? So the NHS, contrary to popular belief, is actually not one organisation. It's a collection of organisations that all have a common goal, and that goal is to deliver the healthcare service for the people of England. I should just point out at this moment in time that the NHS is devolved across the 4 nations that make up the United Kingdom. So Scotland has its own health service, Wales has its own health service, and Northern Ireland also has its own health service. We are focused on the NHS in England. So it's made up of arm's length bodies, and what those are kind of central administration bodies which work directly with the Department of Health and have specific functions. So NHS England Improvement has the function of commissioning all of the healthcare, plus also the regulation of trusts, so setting standards in hospitals and other healthcare settings. NHS Digital is one that you've probably all heard of. That is the national information and infrastructure provider. So they look after national services such as the NHS Data Spine, and they also look after services such as NHS Mail. And they're also the coordination centre for all of the information that's collected about the NHS. So number of patients that are in hospital for various reasons, workforce information, and all kinds of stats. If you see a stat about the NHS, it's more than likely come out of NHS Digital. And then there's also other organisations such as the NHS Business Services Authority, who look after all the kind of important things around pensions, prescriptions, and all of those kind of things. We then have a layer of other organisations, so primary care providers. This includes GPs, dentists, and optometry services, clinical commissioning groups. That is an organisation where a set of GPs and health professionals from regions around the UK come together to look at the services that are required for the people who live in that region and actually buy those services on behalf of those people. We then got NHS trusts. There's two kinds of trusts. There's foundation trusts and I'm just going to call them standard trusts, but they're NHS trusts. They're slightly different in how they work. Foundation trusts have a lot more autonomy. They're able to go and get income from providing other services, and that could be healthcare services out to the private sector, or it could be, in the case of some of them, they actually run hospitals abroad, and the money that they make abroad comes back to fund our healthcare service here. Typically, they are hospitals, clinics, specialist clinics, and they run those services. We also have pharmacies who deliver NHS services. They're kind of on the front line alongside GPs for providing healthcare, and obviously they are part of the supply chain for prescriptions and get you the drugs that you need when you're not feeling very well. Can we get the next slide, please, Jason?
Sure. And today is World Values Day, and it's really apt that it's today while we're at the end of this hack and talking about the NHS, because the NHS is very values driven. In fact, when you walk into our head office, you see on the wall right in front of reception what we stand for. And it's called the NHS Constitution, and it goes like this. See if you identify with some of these ideas. The NHS belongs to the people. It's there to improve our health and well-being, supporting us to keep mentally and physically well, to get better when we are ill, and when we cannot fully recover, to stay as well as we can to the end of our lives. It works at the limits of science, bringing the highest levels of human knowledge and skill to save lives and improve health. It touches our lives at times of basic human need, when care and compassion are what matter most. I wonder if you've experienced some of that from the NHS, or your loved ones have experienced this and you've seen that firsthand. That's what we're about. And hopefully, as we explore what the NHS is, how it's been working through COVID and some of the IT projects, you'll see some of these values coming through. So really, one really important question to ask you now in the last 45 minutes or so of your hack is, how was it? What have you been learning? Yes, you've been doing stuff. You've been building away. You've been trying to solve problems. But what have you learnt along that journey? One of my favourite books, my dad, who's not with us anymore, loved the book Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. And in chapter 11, there's this one fantastic scene where Pip is invited into this garden, and it is a mess. There are trees growing everywhere, vines crawling across everything. And he notices in the corner, there's an old brewery. And it was once one of the finest breweries there were in the country. And it output so much beer that it was unsurpassed. And yet the clocks were stopped and it was left until vines crept in and destroyed the machinery and ripped the roof off. And now, can that building produce beer anymore? No. And I wonder if there's a parallel here with our work in teams. We might have been busy focusing on output, on building something, on delivering the very best we can and being recognised and seen as the best in the country. Yet, what attention have we put into that building, into that brewery in Great Expectations? Or do we let our teams and do we let our behaviours in our teams tear the building apart so that actually what is going to come out at the end? We can't think that if we don't put time and energy into making sure our team is strong and working well, will we get a decent output at the end? So one really important thing we've noticed through COVID is to not only take care of what are we outputting, but how are we doing it? What energy are we putting into building strong teams and making sure our health is in working order and our team's health is in good order? Well, COVID has told us some really interesting things. So do other works of fiction. So in Lord of the Rings, Bilbo Baggins, another one of my favourite characters, he can choose. So in Lord of the Rings, he goes on an adventure there and back again. In The Hobbit. And then in Lord of the Rings, he goes on a quest. So in an adventure, you leave and you come back again. It was a nice trip and it was safe. You did some crazy stuff and you brought back some treasure, but you're back home safe again. Maybe that's a bit like a hack. Whereas a quest, when you set out on a quest, it's dangerous because you cannot go back home again, at least not in the same way. You leave and you will be changed. And working in the NHS and working through COVID changes you. It changes how you work. It changes what you do. It's a quest. And really working in the NHS is a dangerous place to work, not just on the front line, but in IT and in management, because there is so much uncertainty and we're learning as we go and we're discovering, and it's really exciting times. And we just want to share with you a few really exciting projects that has helped us grow and learn and has challenged us as we go. David.
David, you're on
Sorry,
mute.
I'm on mute. Yes, it had to happen at some point, didn't it? I'm going to run through some of the IT projects that we've been working on in the NHS over the last 7 to 8 months. So the first one is facilitating a newly remote workforce, working from home for 12,000 people. So the NHS England and NHS Improvement have quite a large workforce across England. We have around about 45 office locations, and we're primarily based within those offices. We do work out in the sector as well, in hospitals and other healthcare settings, but primarily our work is done within our office buildings. In March, the government, as we all know, asked everyone to work from home. And while we had infrastructure and we had people who were able to work from home for, short periods of time, maybe a couple of days a week or so on and so forth, we did not have the infrastructure to enable 12,000 people to work from home. We had to set this up really quickly. We had to think about it really quickly. A lot of people think about IT as being the computer that you're using in front of yourself, but there are many other things that IT keeps up and running. For example, we've got a few things on here. We've got national telephone numbers. So there are telephone numbers all over NHS England and NHS Improvement, which are there for patients to call. Things like the continuing healthcare teams, the independent healthcare funding teams. All of those numbers are publicised, and all of those numbers end up on a phone that's sat on someone's desk in a building that we can no longer get into. We have a national call centre. So if you see any kind of NHS England or NHS Improvement documentation or information leaflets, there's an 0300 number on there, and that all goes to a building in Redditch. Again, a building at that point we weren't able to access. NHS England and NHS Improvement itself is an organisation that is coming together. About 2 years ago, the government asked the NHS bodies to consolidate and to make better use of the resources that we had. And as part of that, NHS England and NHS Improvement started to work as one organisation. We are, as you can imagine, still going through that process of bringing things together. And right in the middle of this, we were planning what we were going to do with our IT services. We had to accelerate parts of that, and we had to think of new ways of working. And then, of course, there's safe working from home. Some of us, myself included, have a great environment at home. We've got a spare room, we've got a desk, we've got monitors, we've got equipment, and actually we can easily just transfer from the office straight into our home environment and continue to do our job safely. Others of us are not in that position. Some people are perched on the end of a bed with a laptop, for example. Some people have got the space but haven't got the equipment. So we started to look at what we could do with this. And we started to put things in place. So Jason, if we can move on. First thing that we did was we looked at the phone system and thought, we can't install these desk phones into people's houses. It's impossible. We can't get the infrastructure into their house to make it work. We can't do any of that. So what can we do? And we had a look at Microsoft Teams, and we realized quite quickly that we could actually put phone numbers into Teams. And we started to put in place the facilities for people to be able to have a phone number, have calling groups. So those helplines carried on getting answered. And to our customer, the patients and the public, it seems like there's no difference. They can't really tell that they're not talking to someone who's in one of our offices on the end of a phone, which I think is a great achievement. We work with our suppliers to ensure that network capacity allowed people to work from home. Sounds easy. It isn't. We had to get large amounts of bandwidth within our data centres, and we had to do it quickly. Normally, in the NHS, being a public sector organisation, there's several levels of bureaucracy you have to go through to get things done. We had to work differently, and we pushed that bureaucracy aside as much as we could and work directly with our suppliers to get things going. We already had Microsoft Office 365, and we were already using it, but we weren't using it in ways that enabled people to collaborate on documents and work together while in remote locations. We deployed Teams, not just for a telephone system, but actually we converted our workforce overnight from people who sat next to each other, talking to each other, to people who sat at home talking to each other, using Teams as the linchpin in the middle. We had to adapt how we ran our meetings. We had to adapt how we train people to do things. We had people starting with the organisation in the middle of the pandemic, and those people we integrated into our IT systems and tried to make them feel at home using Teams. And for the most part, it's been very successful. We've had quite a lot of good feedback about it. And then we had people who were working at home and needed a safer environment. We ran a program which gave our staff the ability to order such things as monitors and keyboards and mice and chairs, even desks, to enable them to work at home safely. That entailed a huge logistics program. We're not Amazon. We can't do next day delivery. We don't have warehouses full of things ready to go. We had to find suppliers. We had to set up a logistics chain. We had to set up support for people who may find putting screws into chairs a little bit difficult. We had to get our people to understand how to take a monitor out of the box and plug it in. I know it sounds daft, but if you're not doing that kind of stuff all the time, it can be quite daunting. That was a huge endeavour, and we did it in about 3 weeks for most of it. We, on day one of lockdown, where the government asked us all to work from home, our about 7,500 of our 10,000 user base in NHS England and about 1,000 people from NHS Improvement all logged on remotely, and for the most part had an experience that was pretty much equivalent to them being in the offices. We really had to work smart and hard on that, and I think we achieved a great deal with it. And without that happening, the next 2 projects that I'm going to speak about wouldn't have been able to happen. Building hospitals in weeks. So we all know that when you're setting up a hospital, you tend to have quite a period of time to do it. Somebody breaks the ground, somebody builds a building. While that building's being built, you can think about what services you put in there and what you do. And obviously one of the key services in that is IT. So for a typical hospital, you have to source desktop hardware, you have to source network connectivity and get the links specified and installed. That usually takes about 180 days with suppliers to get those network links in. We had to source network hardware, purchase it, get it installed and configured. The desktops, once we got them, we had to actually get the right applications on there, get the right settings on there, get them ready for use in the hospital. And we had to put in place all the support contracts, so service desks, on-site support engineers, including working in dirty clinical areas. So going onto a ward where patients have COVID-19, and obviously protecting our people who we put into those areas, making sure that they're not at any increased risk from the work we're asking them to do. It sounds easy, but when you think about it, you normally have lots and lots of time. But this was actually fraught with complications. So complications were the chosen buildings were not geared up for clinical service. Anybody who's been to the NEC in Birmingham knows that it's a vast, massive exhibition hall where people put up some temporary stands. That one of those exhibition halls, in fact, 4 or 5 of those exhibition halls were turned into hospital wards. They're not built for it. They're not built for IT services. They're not built for Wi-Fi. They're not built for any of that stuff. London Excel Centre, again, huge exhibition halls, not built for the purpose that we wanted to use them for. The settings themselves were still being built as we were trying to specify the IT equipment and the IT services and work out where the cables were going to go and work out how it was all going to hang together. Normally, IT walk into a building that's there and you walk in and you just do your thing. Some of the buildings hadn't actually been selected, but we were being asked to specify for them. So we were being told there's going to be 400 beds in there, get the IT in there. But we didn't know how long the cable runs needed to be, where the switches needed to go, where the equipment needed to go. We had to just kind of use our experience and guess. The team that we had were not experts in clinical ICT. Most of our team have worked within the central arm's length bodies, and it's a very different IT landscape in the arm's length bodies than the clinical ICT. And we're all doing it from home. Only a few people from our team were actually allowed to go and visit these sites. We're actually allowed to go in there while it was being built. We were advising someone who was in there. If you think of the Crystal Maze, when you put a person into a building, into a situation, and then you're outside trying to advise them, but you can't actually see what's going on properly inside there. That's a situation we found ourselves in. We're not used to working in this way. And we had 10 days. The Nightingale Hospital, we had to do all of that within 10 days. We pulled together virtual teams. We pulled together suppliers. We managed to get things done, like network links. The network links, which would normally take 120 days to get in, we got them in 3 days. It was a very, very frenetic environment, as you can imagine. We were working very hard. We were working 12, 15-hour days. Some of us were working 17, 18-hour days, working with suppliers, asking people to do things that were completely out of their comfort zone. But we managed it. We pulled it together and we did it. And I know Jason is going to go through a little bit more detail about how we've done that on some of the other projects when he speaks next. So I won't steal too much of his thunder. But yeah, it's a huge, massive undertaking that we had there. Also, there's a picture of the Nightingale Excel Hospital there in London. We actually did this in 10 sites, I think, Paul. If I'm
each of the Nightingales, Harrogate, NEC, Sunderland, Manchester, Exeter, Bristol, and there's a virtual one being built in the southeast. They're all completely different because there are different medical requirements in different areas or clinical requirements, and we were doing this in parallel. I failed to build my Nightingale in 10 days in Bristol. It was 300 beds, all to be ventilated with oxygen, 4 network points at each bed, and it took 15 days. But you didn't get a lot of sleep, but there's a difference between peacetime working and wartime working.
Yeah.
This was genuine wartime working, and the nearest you get to simulate it is probably a hackathon. But it's amazing what you can do when you've got everybody focused on a common goal.
It is.
Yeah, and now we're going round our Nightingales and getting them ready again for the second wave, but we're waiting to be told when to go.
Yep. So the third and final project I'm going to talk you through is a video consultation service, which is called Attend Anywhere. So while the NHS was embattled with COVID and COVID response, we have patients who were needing to attend outpatient clinics. They couldn't attend outpatient clinics in the hospitals because the hospitals were full of COVID patients. It wasn't a safe environment to bring people into, especially people with existing conditions. But we had to continue to look after those patients and try and make sure that we were able to continue their healthcare. So we had a program that was already in place. It had 4 years to run, and the program was basically ensuring that all secondary care settings could have video consultations, that clinicians had the equipment they needed to carry out the consultations, there was a service desk that could resolve issues, and that clinicians and patients have an online knowledge base to be able to troubleshoot them without needing to call anyone. So we set about that program, and sorry, Jason, if we can have the next slide. We basically, instead of 4 years to complete it, we completed it in 4 weeks. So that involved working with a supplier of software who was based in Australia. So I myself worked some fantastic hours on the weekend, starting at midnight and finishing at 6 in the morning with conference calls. So we were working at the same time as our Australian supplier, making sure that things were ready to go live. We deployed hundreds of iPads and all the necessary support to get the clinicians to be able to use those iPads and carry out those video consultations. We also deployed a service desk. Normally, you would take 3 to 4 months to specify the service desk, and then maybe a couple of months to actually get it up and running, do service rehearsals, build a service desk tool. We did that in 3 weeks. We learned really quickly about things that we weren't expert in. We had to very quickly learn about the NHS frontline. Myself, although I have 20 years experience of working in the NHS, my entire 20 years have been with central bodies that have basically the arm's length body box on the first slide. Very different working environments, very different ways of doing things. Within 4 weeks, I had to learn about outpatient clinics and how to replicate them in a video consultation tool. It was a great experience for me. It was quite, I'll be honest, parts of it were quite stressful. It was quite a steep learning curve. Working 15, 16, 17-hour days for probably 4 or 5 weeks, working on 4 or 5 different projects. But do you know what? It was fantastic. And Jason said that COVID has changed the way we look at things in the NHS and the way we work together in the NHS. And I would absolutely echo that. I think the NHS has got the ability in the last 6 to 7 months through necessity and being on a war footing to really deliver things quickly and to move fast on projects that will traditionally take 3 or 4 years to complete. So I hope that's giving you a bit of an insight into what we've done and how we worked on some of the projects. I've chosen 3 projects from around about 60, but I've chosen ones that hopefully have things that ring true in your own lives and experiences. And what I'm going to do now is hand to Jason, who's going to talk about another project that was done a little bit different to the IT projects, but still a very valuable project.
Thank you. My role is not so much in the IT space, but in the digital and education space. So I'm probably more a user of the IT systems, and some of my team are involved in the development of some of these projects. So I was seconded onto a COVID project back in March, and that was to look at what's the NHS's response to the health and well-being of our staff. So David's mentioned the pressure that people have been under, and Paul's mentioned the long hours, and that takes its toll on staff. You know, a hack is sustainable for a short amount of time, and COVID has gone well beyond that. So we needed a response, and the response that we were asked for brought a number of challenges. So let me tell you about the challenges, and I'll tell you what we did with that. So firstly, the biggest challenge was IT equipment. In order to give a national response, it helps if people have IT equipment that is the same as everybody else, or at least it's interoperable and compatible. That's not necessarily the case for all parts of the NHS, never mind all of the services the NHS commissions from and works with, who also need our wellbeing support at this time. Another challenge was lack of clarity. And this showed up in an ask that came my way, which was, can we prepare some learning material that will help staff being brought back into the workforce manage what they need to do and their well-being through COVID? And that was it. It was literally a few lines. And the ask was, can we do that in 2 weeks, please? So another challenge comes from that sort of an ask, and that's time compression. That feeling that you get when there isn't time to talk about it anymore. There's no time to stop and think. We've got to just do. And that feeling results in really bad behaviors if we listen to it and we act on it. So one of the ways of dealing with that challenge is to stop, pause, and create more time, because it's never as bad, the time compression that is, as we think when it first hits us. I'll come back to that one. And the last challenge is around the loss of connection. In working on a COVID project, we don't work in our usual teams, but people were drawn together from all different disciplines to work together. And one of the biggest challenges I had was in figuring out, who do I need to work with in order to deliver this wellbeing project? So I spent a week mapping it, right? Who's also being asked to do something similar? And what have they been asked to do? Does it sound the same? Should we connect? Is it something separate? Do they know anyone that's also working on something similar? And it took a while to piece together who needs to be in the team. And this was only the first version of my map. It got so complicated, I just gave up. We started learning better ways to work once we found out who was working on the project. One other really useful solution with dealing with these challenges, when faced with that time pressure, is to stop. And one of the things that you need to do when you stop and manage your time better is to think, why are we doing this? What are our governing principles? So in delivering a service to help people with their well-being, I came up with a set of principles with my team, which was, how can we deliver learning content but differently? What do we need to do differently? We know time is important. We know people are under pressure. So really something about delivering something fast is important, but we can't deliver what we usually deliver at that speed. So our kind of overlying principle was, we're not aiming for perfect. Let's put out there our drafts. Let's put out there things that we're working on that we know are not perfect, but it's good enough to help somebody through a crisis. And then you can see the rest of the principles there. And you can look at these slides later. I've put the link in the chat bar if it's of any interest. And so in doing all of that, and in being a public service body that thinks about inclusion and accessibility, actually the systems we delivered at people.nhs.uk, they're not really amazing bits of technology. They're really simple websites, but they were at the right time to have an impact. Again, everything is up there at people.nhs.uk, and we are still adding content round through till next year as we go through the second wave. And so what we've seen is we did do some right things here. We've already won one category of Best Wellbeing Initiative, and we're up for 4 more awards for this piece of work. So we know that these challenges and the blood, sweat and tears we poured into this has really paid off. So I just want to share with you the one thing that I would give to you as a gift from a leadership perspective to help you. You're obviously at the end of your hacks, and this won't help right now, but when you come up against very similar challenges, just like this, just like COVID, just like whatever it is that's putting you under pressure in the jobs that you take up in the future. And that is to ask questions. So a colleague of mine and I, we love to challenge, and we ask loads of questions, and we often told them we were younger, stop asking all these questions. So we formed what we notionally called in the Leadership Academy, the Department of Questions, or as we preferred to call it, the Ministry of Mischief, where we made sure we were always asking questions. And this is in line with what Einstein did. So obviously we're in good company. And he said, if we've got a whole hour to solve a problem, let's spend 55 minutes asking questions first, because if we ask the right question, we'll know that when we start delivering in that last 5 minutes, we'll deliver the right thing, and we'll deliver it well, and we'll solve the problem. So questions are really important. There are 3 really important parts to ask a really good question. That is the construction of your question, the words you use, the assumptions underlying your question, what are your biases, and the scope of your question. What's its remit? How far does this question get cast when you ask it? I just want to look at 2 of these really quickly to give you something to take away that's really practical. So in terms of the construction of your question, there are 4 levels of construction. You can ask a really small question that's really closed down, and you ask somebody, which one of these would you choose from? Do you like the blue button or the green button? Do you like the website or not? And that's it. So really, the solution you get is very limited. The next level up asks questions about, what is it? Who needs to be in the team? I've asked this question, so it's not a bad question. Where do we do it? When are we doing it? These aren't bad questions, but they're not as powerful as they could be, but they do need to be asked. Then bigger questions we can ask are around, why are we doing this? How do we do it? How do we work together to deliver this thing? And the most powerful question asks, what if? Let's imagine a future, something that I can't conceive of, but let's sit and imagine together. And Einstein, again, did this and came up with his theories of relativity and light and time. And his powerful questions, see how it starts? What if? What if I could ride a beam of light across the universe? Have you asked questions like this on this hack? Have you gone to those really crazy spaces and asked just the insane questions just to start thinking about the problem differently? Well, when you start asking questions, when you start looking at solutions, you can think about the end goal. What are we going to deliver, especially when time is pressured? We're looking at the output. And so we forget about a lot of thinking that needs to happen before we get to that. In fact, there's something called the think-do dialectic, where we look at truth. Through doing some stuff, yes, we do a hack, we start experimenting, but that informs our thinking. So that next time we start acting, we're doing it based on some learning that's gone on. And so asking questions helps us unpick our thinking a little bit more before we get to that doing stage, the outcome on this diagram. And there are 3 areas we can look at before we look at building our solution and delivering an outcome. The first thing we need to do some learning around and asking some questions about are our own actions. Are we doing the right thing? Are we plugging the right thing into the right port? Are we putting the computers in the right place? Are we writing the code accessibly? Are we doing it according to the standards? A deeper way of thinking, though, that we need to ask is around our own assumptions. Are these even the right things to do, is the question we should be asking there. And then below that, the real deepest questions we should ask, and we rarely go to, is around the context in which we are existing as we deliver this project. How are we deciding what's right? What are our governing principles? Why this way? Why not another way? What happens if we look at it through another person's eyes and we alter the context? Those are the sorts of questions that help us understand our context, our assumptions, our actions, all before we move to looking at outcomes. And I would encourage you to do this sort of thinking and this sort of learning before jumping straight into delivery. There's one key question we ask at the Academy to help us understand. Remember that brewery I talked about in Great Expectations at the beginning? So that we don't end up delivering lots, but the building crumbles around us, our team falls apart, is asking the question of, what is it like to be on the receiving end of me? What am I like to work with? How have I come across? When I said that thing, I didn't mean it. What did it feel like when I said that to you? I'm sorry. Will you help me learn so that I can come across better when I talk to the team again? So these are our projects from COVID. These are some of the questions that we encourage you to ask. And that's it from me. I think it's over to you for some questions.
Stunned silence.
More like, wow. Amazing. Can you hear me? I see some questions coming in. Okay. No, still echoing.
So people are putting questions in the chat. If you have one to ask out loud, put your hand up and we'll come to you. There was a little bit of an echo before, so I don't know if that was a question from whoever spoke, but I'll answer Hannah's in the chat box. And thank you, Zoe, for your feedback. So Hannah asks, is the People Support website something that is available to placement students? The People website itself is open source. It has learning resources that anyone anywhere can use. There are some services on there, such as a text messaging support service, coaching services that are intended for those that are on the NHS payroll, as it were, or are partly funded by the NHS. But there are some exceptions. So there are some services on there for health and social care, and there are complementary services in Wales and Scotland. So have a dig around, and it should say before you get to a point at which it's not for everybody to manage the cost of providing that particular service. So yes, in the most part, is the answer.
Are there any other questions that we can answer for anyone?
Maybe I should speak this one. Can you hear me? It's Hannah.
Yeah, hi Hannah.
Hi. I'm thinking about like the change management of things. So in my experience of doing like IT support to frontline NHS staff and stuff, their IT skills are very varying. So I'm interested how you prepared them for moving to more online and stuff. Were there any really innovative things you did, or how you reached people remotely, sort of thing?
So I think one of the biggest things about this, Hannah, is we didn't actually have time to prepare people. And I think one of the things that helped us succeed with a lot of the things that we did to facilitate remote working were that people had to adapt, if that makes sense. Whereas normally people are quite resistant to change. So if we were going to roll out a new system to our internal employees, they're in their normal situation, sat in their office. They're quite resistant to change. But when everybody's placed into a strange situation, everybody has to pull together. And what I can say is that our customer base, our internal customer base, were crying out for things to help them work from home, and we're a receptive audience, if that makes sense, Hannah.
If I can just add to that, David, if we were to remove all of the printers from all of our offices in January, there would have been a heck of a lot of noise. When everybody has to work from home, they haven't got any of these big printers around, and they coped. We didn't have any huge discussion about it. There weren't any. And it's amazing how people will adapt and react when they have to. And I just have to take my hat off to people. They didn't get aerated and yell and scream or whatever. It was very much, it's the wartime. We're all in it together. And if I learn how to do something, I'll pass it on to you. It required us to trust people. And maybe we don't do enough of that.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. And as I said, our customer base all found themselves in this situation where they were suddenly having to adopt these technologies and having to adopt these things to work from home, and they were much more receptive. We obviously did our bits as well. We created a whole library of videos so people could watch videos of how to do things in Microsoft Teams. We created a whole set of drop-in sessions where people could join sessions on how to effectively work from home, how people could effectively use Microsoft Teams to run meetings, how people could adapt how they ran their meetings to be in that virtual environment. So we did do quite a campaign of bits and pieces, but I think, as I said, everyone being in the same position at the same time actually enabled the change much more than some of the things that we did, if that makes sense, Hannah.
Yeah. And if I can add just one other thing, everybody was involved, from the most senior executives, Sir Simon Stevens down. Everybody was open and honest about we're all in it. And yep. It was just fascinating to see a deeply conservative organisation like a health service that for years has been thought to be very, very resistant to change, suddenly flipping over very fast. Absolutely fascinating what you can do with people.
Does that answer your question, Hannah?
Yeah, that does. That's great. Now it's all like maybe settling in the IT stuff. I imagine it will become like quite an exciting thing, maybe to expand even further on it, and think of what else you can do with now these new infrastructures.
I totally agree, and we are starting to look at what the next round of projects and the next round of services look at. We were in the process of already looking to replace our IT services, but I will say, although we were being innovative with what we were putting in place, it didn't stray too much from where we were. But now, obviously, we are starting to look at those services with a much a very different lens. And I think, Paul, it's safe to say we're incorporating what we've learned in the last 9 months into those new services to make sure that we build and capitalise on where we found ourselves. We wouldn't have intentionally found ourselves here, but now we have found ourselves here and we've seen the advantages of it. I think it's we've got an obligation really to build on it and continue from where we are.
If I can just add, new challenges that we've got are, how are we going to vaccinate 50 million people? What sort of IT will we need to set up around the number of vaccination centres and who was vaccinated with which batch of what, and all of those other things? We'll have to do those, but there'll be a lot of other challenges as we go into the second wave, and hopefully not a third wave. But the challenges will continue, but we've got time to bring in AI and all sorts of other things, other technologies, to try to assist.
Thanks for your question, Hannah. Has anybody else got any other questions either in the chat box or feel free to speak?
Are you finding the element of speed is sticking in a very large, complex organization?
So yes and no. We obviously are quite regimented around our financial processes and what we have to do to get authority to spend money, and that was relaxed quite a lot during the COVID period, as you can imagine. Some of that is creeping back in, and for good reason for most of it, but we do still have that impetus to do things fast, and where we can, we are. Things that would have taken 3-4 months to look at and do, we are continuing to do within 3 to 4 weeks. Bigger projects such as the one that Paul mentioned at the top of this meeting, they obviously have to go via the standard sets of governance and so on and so forth. But yeah, we are trying to stick with the speed that we've got over the last 7 months.
I think it's a very good question to also ask of the project itself. Do we need to work at this pace? And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the reason for pace is driven by somebody else's fear who's passing on the task to you. So it's always good just to question, hang on, why this speed? Is it necessary?
Yeah, agreed.
So is it? I mean, I'm going maybe to some basics here, David and Paul. Do you find a lot of applications to come and work in the NHS England IT or digital from graduates, or particularly around technology graduates? Because when I was a grad, I never thought that I'm going to go work for the NHS because that's hospitals and that's health. Now we're learning, the kind of fundamental pieces that make and operate the organization in terms of technology.
Yeah.
Has it been gradually increasing over the years, or is it becoming more and more a digital business, not business, organization?
So yeah, we are becoming more and more digital. Patient-facing systems, patient-facing services are especially becoming digital. There's a great move to move as many things as we can online, because it improves things for the citizens of the country and makes the services more accessible to people. The NHS itself has drives internally to digitise things such as patient records, which we've been doing for a few years now. The NHS Spine, which has obviously joined up the various bits of the NHS into healthcare records that are accessible across the piece. And as I said, that quite a lot of our citizen-facing services going digital. One of the examples is the secondary care video consultation service, which was meant to happen over 4 years, happened over 4 weeks. That's here to stay. We get a lot of good feedback from people because they can, instead of having to travel to a hospital, sit in a waiting area, have slow running clinics, they can basically join from their iPad at work, sat at home. It's better for their time, and they can still receive the care that they need to resolve and help them with their health problems. In terms of graduates applying, I've been a hiring manager in the NHS for about 15 years, and I've always seen quite a large graduate contingent applying for roles. I think the most important thing for people to realise, as you said, Rian, you at the beginning of your statement, is people see it as hospitals and healthcare. There are so many different careers in the NHS now in relation to information and technology. So many different career paths. There are national organisations such as NHS Digital and NHS England and the new NHSX unit that are geared up to delivering IT-based services for citizens and for staff. And there's all kinds of paths, development paths, support paths, using new technologies such as AI and bringing those things into the NHS. There's a whole career source out there, and I would encourage anyone who's looking to start out. And Jason's just popped something in the chat box. I would encourage anyone who's starting out on their IT career or business career to have a good look at the NHS and see if it's a place for you to start. Maybe build a career that start off in the NHS and get that experience in the public sector, or indeed, be like me, for example, and come in for what you think is going to be 18 months and still be here 20 years later. Yeah, I hope, does that answer your question, Rian?
No, yeah, absolutely it does, and that link is really helpful, Jason. I came in for into university, and I think I've been here now. I'm counting probably the same decades as you are, David. But it's fascinating how these roles can be rewarding in organizations like this when you're transforming lives and making a huge difference.
Yes, Rian, if I can just add a couple of little statistics. Sure. We have 1.7 million people working within the NHS. We have a turnover in NHS England of £113 billion. We have effectively 5% of the workforce in the UK are in the NHS. So the numbers and the complexity means that you cannot find anything that's as big and as complex, which therefore requires the skills of IT people to turn data into information and information into knowledge. Wow. And so in terms of a challenge to anyone, I don't think you'll find anything remotely as challenging as what we've got.
And I would agree as well. And we do this on public sector resources, which, as you know, the NHS's main business is healthcare, and most of its budget goes into looking after patients, providing healthcare services. We don't have a massive set of IT budgets, but you learn quickly in working for the NHS in IT. You don't have a huge budget, but the expectation is huge. So you learn quickly how to operate with limited resources. I would wholeheartedly recommend to any graduate who wants a long-lasting career in IT that starting in the NHS and starting to look there is a great place to kick off your career. And if you want to stay in a role where you are actually making a direct difference to people, it doesn't matter whether you are on an IT service desk fielding calls from internal customers, or whether you are developing the NHS spine. Every single role makes a difference to people's lives, either directly or in a supporting. You're supporting the people who are making the difference to people's lives. So I'm very. You can probably tell I'm very passionate about it. I've worked here for 20 years, but I would wholeheartedly recommend that anyone who's looking for a career in IT looks at the NHS.
Absolutely, I think I echo that. Rewarding careers, those are. But I think on behalf of everybody, particularly Birmingham Tech Week, Birmingham, you're individuals that are the unsung heroes that run the infrastructure for the NHS, lead the infrastructure. A big thank you from us. You continue doing this remarkable work. So really thank you for keeping a lot of us alive, for that matter, but and keeping those projects going. It's really it's heartfelt to hear the kind of work that goes into it, particularly from a tech and digital perspective. Really appreciate for you guys to coming over and sharing these with us, and we look forward to doing more and bringing more of these experiences out. And as you said, let's see the drafts, let's see what's happening, explore together, and build on to make it stronger.
Okay.
Big thank
you. Thank you, Ria.
Thank you.
I think we're going to wrap there, Andrea. Is that? Yeah, I think that will. So we're going to jump on to the next call with IBM, and then we're looking forward to judging those projects that are being submitted as we speak, I believe. In the meantime, thank you everybody for attending. Shreya, are you there?
Hi, Wayne. Yes, I am.
Okay.
Thank you for that. That was a good session.
Very good. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.